ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Tiki Talk Show. I'm Riley.
And I'm Ellie.
And today we have a very special guest. We have Mr. Sven Kirsten. Mr. Kirsten has written a number of books on the topic of Tiki, but he's not just a historian, he's an urban archeologist and has been an active member of the Tiki scene for over 30 years now. We're very appreciative of his time and him sitting down with us. This week you're going to notice that we don't have an artist spotlight. That's so we could capitalize on the amount of time that we had with him, and so you could hear our conversation in its entirety. We really hope you enjoy it.
Thanks for listening.
Aloha and welcome back to the Tiki Talk Show. I'm Riley.
And I'm Ellie.
And today we have the great pleasure of bringing you an interview with Mr. Sven Kirsten. Mr. Kirsten, how are you?
I'm good. I'm happily sitting here in my office, which is my kitchen table. So,
Well,
you're going to have to shut me up because I can talk Tiki for a long time.
Careful, I don't think we're too inclined to cut you off at any point. So when the sun starts to set on the West Coast, maybe we'll call it then.
My wife will probably cut it off because we got reservations for the Magic Castle this evening, and that's always a privilege. I've been there, several times, but you only can get in if you know a member. So yeah, we're going there. But anyway, what do you want to know about Tiki?
We typically start our interviews by asking our guests how they got into Tiki, but clearly you have quite a long history. You're a well-published author, so we're going to expand the question a little bit more and ask you how you originally got interested in the mid-century design style in general and how that led you to Tiki.
Well, first of all, I'm a visual artist. I am a cinematographer, so I call myself a visual junkie, which means I feed on imagery, and I constantly need new influx of interesting and fascinating images. And in the 90s in LA, there wasn't, it really started with a roommate of mine bringing back these two Milan Guanco carvings of Easter Island statues that she had bought at a Filipino market. Apparently, in the early 90s, Milan Guanco was still selling his stuff at Filipino markets, and they fascinated me. And so I started, trying to figure out what they were called. And then I found the term Tiki somehow, and I looked it up, and there was nothing. Like I said, it was a black hole. The term, it's hard to imagine now because with a few, mouse clicks, you have hundreds of links about Tiki. But back then, it literally didn't exist. And the way you did research was going into the yellow pages and looking for places with Hawaiian names, places that would sell stuff. And that's how I found a place, where was it, in Long Beach or San Pedro? And it was called Benson's Tropical Supplies. They were, listed as selling seashells and tropical supplies and stuff. And I went there, and it was kind of a forgotten place too. And in some cardboard box on a shelf, I found like some little wooden moais, and I asked the owner if he had any more of that style of carving, and he was like kind of gruff, and then he sort of like pointed me towards Oceanic Arts, because back in the heyday, those two had been competitors, Benson's and Oceanic Arts. But he did mention that name to me, so I looked up Oceanic Arts. I went there, and it was the late 80s, and I was blown away because it was really like the King Tut's tomb of Tiki. They were still in their old location in Whittier, but in a different warehouse, and from which they had to move. So there was these shelves, and shelves, it was like the warehouse in Raiders of Lost Ark. It was just like this infinite corridors of shelves with stuff. And I always tell the story that when I came in, Leroy was sitting at the counter like this, and he had a spider web going here. That's how slow it was for them, you know.
Yeah.
So he was very enthusiastic about my enthusiasm, and he pulled out this stack of restaurant menus. It was literally a stack of all these jobs that they had worked on. And me always having been into visual and graphic arts, I just went through them and I was like blown away at the graphic art on these menus. And you know, the thought came to my head that somebody should make a book about this. And I just would have never imagined that it would be me, because I was a cinematographer. I wasn't an author. I didn't go and study literature or anything like that. So I bought some stuff from Leroy. Later, I found out that Bob got mad at him because he sold me like some samples that from the wall of where the samples and I still have those, my first pieces that I bought at Oceanic Arts. And then I kept coming back. And through Oceanic Arts, I also found out about apartment buildings that they worked on. And, you know, to me, it really became apparent that Tiki was not just an art style, but it was an architectural design and lifestyle that went beyond restaurants. Because if you think about it, you know, yes, there are a few other themed apartment buildings, but not like with Tiki. It went beyond restaurants into apartment buildings, bowling alleys, motels, theme parks. You know, that's what really made it into its own genre, like Art Deco or mid-century modernism. And now that you mentioned mid-century modernism, that wasn't called mid-century modernism back then. You know, you were into the 50s. And you know, I was always already into that design style, the amoeba-shaped tables and the cool modernist lamps and stuff, but it wasn't defined as such either. And you know, what always fascinated me with Tiki is the conjunction of primitivism and modernism coming together in it, and coexisting at the same time. But anyway, so I started driving around LA looking for apartment buildings, and started photographing them in the early 90s. And then we had this Cacophony Society. The Cacophony Society was this prankster club in San Francisco and in LA. And their chapter here had a meeting at the Bahuka that was called the Night of the Tiki. And like 10 people got together there and were exchanging stories. That was in 1992. And it dawned on me that I already knew more about Tiki than any of these guys. And so I thought, I guess I have to be the one that does the book. And so I put this cut and paste proposal together. It was a chapter lineup that in 1992, it was very close to what the Book of Tiki ended up to be.
Wow.
But then it still took 8 years for the Book of Tiki to find a publisher. And then the rest is history.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's usually how it goes. The publishing and getting it out there is one of the hardest parts. So you said that Tiki is a black hole during this time period, and you're saying that you're going firsthand to experience these places, what remnants were left, and you did have some kind of guiding lights like Oceanic Arts.
Yeah.
Outside of that, what was it like to do research? Were you in the library looking at microfiche of Don the Beachcomber's opening, or what was that like?
I went also to used bookstores. There were lots of them back then, you know, where you found like old like issues of travel books like Tiki or Trader Vic's recipe books and stuff like that. Then I went to thrift stores and to flea markets, the Pasadena flea market and stuff, and slowly started collecting stuff, and then with the elements of oceanic arts and my collecting, the pieces of the puzzle started to started telling a story. But also, of course, that was also helped by meeting other fellow collectors through friends. No, there was no internet or anything. So it was just like by hearsay. Oh, you like that stuff? I know this and this guy that likes that stuff too. And which was always surprising to me because there was nobody else around. And that's how I met Jeff Barry. And then I met Bosco and Mark Ryden. Mark Ryden was supposed to be the artist that uh, would that was supposed to do the cover for the Book of Tiki originally, but then he got too famous within the 8 years of not getting it done. And so I'm glad I had my German artist friend Moritz do the cover. But yeah, we formed this small group of people that um, I organized these symposiums or symposia at friends' houses where I would already do slideshows of a combination of my collectibles and photos of apartment buildings and tikis that I had found, and the roadside and stuff like that.
Yeah. One of the things I'm kind of curious about, I'm really excited to hear about the urban archaeology and the backyard luau's and how those kind of came to be. One of the things we were talking to Christy White, Tiki Kaliki, a little while back, and she was talking about how some of her friends, and she was into it in the 90s, they would go to California, and they said, like, you walk into any thrift store and you can find 12 of these, and it's the Harveys at Lake Tahoe mugs or something like that. Do you remember, just kind of off topic, but do you remember any like particularly great finds or anything like that, or find 2 Voodoo Grog tumblers or anything like that in thrift stores back then?
Yeah, the Voodoo Grog tumbler. No, nothing specific comes to mind. It is hard to match the experience of going to Oceanic Arts
Mm-hmm.
because they had their mug cabinet with all with mugs in it and lamps, so you had an idea. The table lamps, amazing stuff. You had an idea of what was out there, and I don't have any. It's too long ago for me to remember where I found what exactly that
Yeah.
was impressive. Um, I just remember feeling like, oh, I should have done what Otto did. What Otto before, uh, thinking after the Book of Tiki came out, because Otto not only bought like one example of a mug, but he bought like all the copies that were there. They were just $1 or $2.
Yeah,
Uh,
and now there are hundreds and hundreds of dollars on eBay.
well, it depends. It depends on the mug.
Yeah.
It came after this mug craze now. There's so many people into, getting these modern mugs that the vintage ones actually have gone down in value. I mean, there are some exceptional and really rare ones that haven't, but a lot of the vintage mugs, and I've been, arguing with people and some of these Facebook uh, pages, I literally had a woman say that wanted to know what the value of a vintage mug was, and people saying, oh, this is that and that and stuff. And she literally said, why would I want to keep some old mug from some old restaurant? Like turning things on its head.
Yeah.
That you wouldn't even know about this if we hadn't done the work.
And that's yeah, you kind of hit at the core of at least our show, is to say that look at all this amazing stuff from the mid-century and all the people who brought it back. And Now maybe the certain things have changed, but we're jumping forward 30 years, or really to like 3 weeks ago to the Peekaboo
Yeah.
Galleries. I was bidding in that auction, and I thought I was going to lose every auction. I thought every one that I was bidding in, I was going to lose by 100. I got everything I wanted. No
Oh, you
better.
got some deals there.
Oh
For
yeah.
that very reason. It's also, let me close the window, there's a helicopter. At the time, people right now are watching their money, and the mug craze has sort of peaked. And I think the modern mug collectors are looking at their wall and saying, what the hell? What did I pay $250 for these mugs? Um, I always tell the story of, I was an early fan of Monk Tiki in the early 2000s. When they started putting out stuff, their designs were so cool. And but they were $40. And I'm like, I'm not paying $40. Yeah. Oh well.
Yeah, I mean that's 20 yeah, hindsight's 2020 for a reason, I suppose. So you mentioned how through word of mouth you were meeting other people in the scene like Jeff or Otto. Do you remember kind of either the first meetings or because you mentioned you went to Bahukas and you kind of looked around and go like, I know, I'm the
Yeah.
guy who knows more or anything
Yeah,
like
none
that.
of the guys at Bahukas were part of that group then. It was through other people that we met. Um, uh, I remember Jeff Barry being over at my place and Bosco coming over, and he brought some of the first masks that he carved from palm wood and laid them out on my lawn, and we bought some. And he said, like, I'm going to start making tiki mugs. And Jeff and I were like, what, you can make tiki mugs? It just had never occurred to us. These were like vintage things that you found in thrift stores. And yeah, and so Bosco was the first one to do that and come up with that concept. And also we were already like a small group here up in Hollywood, and Jeff Barry and I and who else was it? Kevin and Jody. We met Kevin and Jody later. But anyway, somebody told us about Otto in Venice when he was living down in Venice. And he was doing these tiki mug parties in his backyard. And we were like, who's this guy? We had never, because somehow we felt like we had pretty much met everyone already that was into tiki. And then we went to the tiki mug party, and that's where we met Josh Agel, because Otto was friends with him. And then the nucleus started even coming together more. And the same thing happened with Kevin and Jody. We heard about them, and then pretty soon they started organizing their Anaheim museum show, and we all contributed in. I did like one or two slideshows at the Anaheim Museum for them. And yeah, and then we started, having these symposiums, or just meet on my front porch, because people at that time, Jeff and Nanine Barry just lived across the Silver Lake from me on a little side street called the Aloha Street, ironically. And Kevin and Jody lived in Eagle Rock, which was just like, 10 minutes from my house. And Otto still lived in LA. And then, how it happens here, people move away. Jeff ended up in New Orleans, Otto in San Francisco. Kevin and Jody moved to Anaheim, which is, they might as well move to San Francisco, so never get to see them anymore. But yeah, it was a really tight-knit group. And what was so amazing in retrospect is that each one of us followed their path, developing these different aspects of tiki culture. I was the art and design guy, and I don't want to just be called a historian because I see myself as, you know, a constant participant in the revival. So I was into art and design and architecture. Jeff Berry too, but he then focused in on the cocktails by us going to the Tiki Tea and talking to Ray Buhin and stuff. Otto was the organizer of the events. There were, you know, he started early on doing these little tiki gallery shows and like communal places. And Josh Agel was the artist. Bosco was the carver and mug maker, you know, and in a way, it was really like the beginning of an art movement of all of these key people not having any idea that this was going to become such an art movement, but just following their passion and developing what they were doing into more, you know, deeper ways.
Yeah, you guys all had like a passion or like a specific point that complemented each other so well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it almost exactly reflects the what Tiki really was, but it wasn't just bars, it wasn't just restaurants, it was a full encompassing thing from ranging from art and music all the way down to what's on your plate or what's in your glass. And you're mentioning a lot of these either art events or specific events. There's a couple that I'm pretty interested with. I was reading recently, I think it was in the LA Times in 1995. Otto, it seemed like that was a busy year for him. I think he did his first art exhibit at a cafe, and then by the end of the year, November of 1995, he did Exoticon 1995, and we just sat down with Don Frazier recently, who was one of the artists who was present there. Were you at Exoticon? Because from what I saw, it's the first tiki or lounge event, I should say.
Well, it was the first bigger event, you know.
Sorry, that's what I meant.
United Lounge, the lounge revival really had a lot to do with the Tiki revival because of Exotica music. That was part of the revival of, you know, of the lounge revival. So Exoticon was an example of that. Since it was more like a party, I didn't do a talk, but I had a slideshow going in the second room. And so that was basically my participation of Exoticon 95.
Okay. I think it's it definitely in that mid 90s period. It was very interesting because you get Pulp Fiction in 1994, which kind of begins the surf revival period of the mid 90s. You get I think Combustible Edisons. I can't remember. I think it was
1994.
Right. No, they played at Exoticon. And they came from the East Coast, but they had their own little part of their show called the Tiki Hour. So, you know, all these other enthusiasts started showing up through Tiki News, because when we started putting out Tiki News in the 90s, it was like a classic, like a punk fanzine. You know, it was printed on black and white paper, and it was just hand distributed to record shops and hipster shops. But people found it in Chicago and on the East Coast, and you know, like James Teitelbaum or so, they started connecting with us, and that really, you know, broadened the scope of the whole revival.
Absolutely. And not to mention certain major record labels who were worried about their interest in their old recordings, like Mondo Exotica is released in 1995, I believe, and things like that. Yeah, I think Tiki News started in 1995 as well. I think it was February 95 was the first issue, somewhere out there.
Yeah, and you know, that grew, but it still remained sort of a subculture, and I purposely waited. I mean, not that I had that many offers, but I did have offers for the Book of Tiki from like Research and other underground publishers. And I didn't want it to be in black and white like Tiki News was. And I also didn't want it to stay inside the circle of hipsters that it was in right now. I wanted to re-enter pop culture. And so I held out for a better publisher that had good distribution, because from working in film, I knew how crucial distribution is. If you can, pour your heart, soul into a movie, and even if you get it done, you're lucky. But if you don't have distribution, nobody gets to see it.
Right.
So till Taschen found me, or I found Taschen, it no big publisher wanted to do it. And I was lucky about Taschen because they were international. And so people actually found the Book of Tiki in like Argentina or in Bucharest, or it was just amazing. It was just amazing.
Absolutely. So in those early days, even though Tiki had become what you call a black hole in the 70s and through the 80s, certain establishments did remain open, like the Bali High, the Tonga Hut, the Tiki Tea. What was it like going to those places in like the 80s, 90s period?
I always it's also the paradox of the newer of the recent Tiki revival. And I always point out to my forward in Tiki Road Trip, where I say, if you find an original Tiki bar, do not accept Epicurean sensations or or put it in other words. But, nowadays people like, you post about going to some old Tiki bar, and the question is, how are the cocktails? That is so spoiled. And so,
Yeah.
you know that wasn't the problem back then. That didn't come to mind. It was amazing to find original spaces with original decor, and that had survived the big devolution of Tiki of the late 70s and 80s. And yeah, that appreciation, of course, is totally gone now, because people, go into these new, completely decked out Tiki bars and with these amazing cocktails, and it's like, oh, that's how it always was. No.
Right.
I think that's the double-edged sword of the revival, because I mean, you get Jeff Barry, who does everything that he does, and Martin Kate, and people like that, who are able to bring these amazing cocktail experiences. But because it's through in some recipes, in Jeff's case, it's a decades, 2 decades worth of work to try to hunt them down, find them, or Martin Kate to rework them. I could only imagine if you went to I don't know, the Bali High in 1985. If you ordered a Mai Tai, what would you get? I don't think it would probably,
It wasn't,
replicate what we were
I
getting
didn't
now.
know any better. I mean,
Yeah.
I knew better from Jeff Barry, because Jeff Barry, of course, uh, started doing his research, and he would have me over and do like flights of cocktails of recipes that he was, trying out and stuff.
Mhm.
But it wasn't like there wasn't a standard that I was holding drinks up to, and it's still like that. I prefer an original vintage tiki bar to some hoity-toity craft cocktail place.
Right.
And
Yeah.
and especially after all these weird changes these new places have been going through with cultural appropriation, like they're everything that they're doing is like a tiki bar, but they don't want to be called a tiki bar.
Right.
There's a one I won't name which bar, but anyone who's familiar with it would be able to figure it out. There's one in Seattle that
Yeah.
definitely is exactly like that. It's on their website and everything. I think that is kind of funny, and you mentioned that. I really would want to get your opinion about. I know we're skipping way ahead. We were in 1995, and now I think we're in 2025.
But
Some
it's
of the
good to,
changes, the modern bars you're
well,
seeing.
it's good to do a comparison
Yeah.
between what it was in the 90s and the rarity of it, and the appreciation that you would have for these discoveries as opposed to the modern scene that has this, sense of entitlement sometimes. Like, I want a top cocktail and I want Martin Denny to be played. Otherwise, it's not a tiki bar.
What I love seeing, well, I don't love it, but I'll see on Facebook or Reddit, wherever, and someone going like, I'm going to insert small town in some Midwest. What tiki bars are nearby? And it's like,
Yeah,
nothing for 500 miles. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Not every town has one.
I know yeah, and I really have to be control myself to be polite and not come across as jaded or as arrogant when I try to answer those questions, because people just they're innocent in their queries. So I don't want to offend anybody, but I'm like, sometimes I just want to be the grouchy old man.
Like, you kids don't know how good you have it.
Well, if anyone's earned to be the grouchy old, I think it's you, because it's funny. I mean, I'll hear people go, I'll see, maybe I'll look back or something like that, and I see someone arguing with you about like that's not how it was. I'm like, and I want to tell the person like, maybe a little while after, like, you're arguing with the wrong guy. Like, if somebody knows, it's probably him.
Yeah, it's I'm pretty amazed that I'm still with this and I was with it from the start. But what's even more amazing is that I still have some of my best friends, Jeff Barry and Otto, we're still best friends.
Yeah.
For all these years. It's really pretty amazing. And yeah, of course online discussions, we all know that you can never win a Facebook argument. People dig in, and and I've been called a purist and a gatekeeper 100 times, and if people want to believe that, fine, let's move on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the same boat. I've walked the line too, and when people tell me Tiki can be anything you want, it's all made up anyway. More power to you, I
Yeah.
guess. I'm not. I'll move on with my day and I'll be happy, I guess.
No, you can only lead with a good example, and some people
Yeah.
get it and some people don't, and that's just it.
Yeah.
It's just interesting that you would be considered a gatekeeper, because those are people who keep people from enjoying the subculture or whatever, when you're really the person who kind of helped bring it back to everybody to even be available to enjoy.
Yeah.
The American spirit it has this, sometimes it's called toxic individualism of, you can't tell me what I like or what I want to, what I am supposed to do. It's like the instant reaction as soon as they sense any form of authority, and even if it's a well-founded authority, and that's well-founded in knowledge and experience, they have this knee-jerk reaction of like, you can't tell me what I like. Yeah, no, if either you want to know what tiki is about, or you want to make your own tiki, and then go ahead without me.
Right.
Fair enough. Well, on that semi a little bit, maybe we took a little bit jump to the future and talking about where we're at now. Let's jump back into the early days. So we talked a little bit kind of about the backyard luau's, and we talked about the get-togethers, the symposiums. How were those? Again, I mean, I presume it's word of mouth, but how was that spread to like maybe a wider audience before Tiki, or I guess this is after Tiki News, but definitely before Tiki Central?
I would say it was flyers, and there used to be, um, in those days, there used to be these citywide program magazines like LA Weekly, and or internationally was called Time Out or so, where you could, you had your week of events in front of you, and you would put ads in that and stuff. What did you call those magazines that you could pick up for free? program. See, I don't even
Like
remember.
bulletins almost?
No. Like the LA Weekly. They got all swallowed up with the internet and all that stuff, disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, word of mouth and ads in those, weeklies. And there was, this scene that was developing around all of us and our events. But it's still, like I said, it was still very underground, a subculture, really,
Yeah.
Till the Book of Tiki then really defined it for the first time, and so many more people recognized even, what they had grown up with, and was, oh, that's what that was. And I never knew that this, existed too, and kind of a thing. And then the term tiki really became the term for it, and became widely known.
Okay. Yeah, I think so the Book of Tiki came out in 2000. Correct. And the original Tiki Central, I think it started as a Yahoo message board, I believe,
Right.
right about the same time, if I'm
Yeah,
not
it
mistaken.
was synchronicity again. Holden started mass producing tiki mugs. Shaq started having his first successful gallery shows. And so people started coming into tiki from different directions. Like, some people discovered tiki because they loved Shaq's art. Some people found their old first tiki farm mug and stuff like that. And then pretty much in 2001, Otto did the first Tiki Oasis. That was really, that was the beginning of all the weekenders. And then Tiki Kelly Christie and Tim Glasner did the Hukilau in Atlanta the next year.
Mhm.
And from then on, all the Tiki weekenders started taking off.
So would you put it right around like the 2001 is like when it has the label of Tiki now? Would you call that like kind of when the scene really started to take off and the ball was rolling at that point?
Yeah, it changed from a subculture to a pop culture, really. It became. And I mean, I'm very happy that the Book of Tiki really achieved my goal, that it helped Tiki to re-enter American pop culture. And not only, I people had talked to me about Taschen in the 90s while I was shooting in Germany, and I went to the Taschen bookstore, and I was like, no, that's a German publisher. I want it to be an American book. And what happened in 1999, Benedict Taschen moved to LA and was looking for material to publish for the American market. So that was, the point when I said, yeah, okay, let's do that. It's kind of ironic because there was another German, that published the book.
Right. So out of curiosity, what were other publishers saying? Were they looking at it going like, I don't know what this stuff is, next thing, or was it
I
just
have
so
to
out there?
hold on. This is my rejection letter from Chronicle Books. Chronicle Books was an art book, coffee table book publisher at the time. It's from October 9th, 1992. Dear Sven Kirsten, thank you for giving us the chance to review the Book of Tiki. It is interesting and entertaining, but I think it is simply too much on too small a subject. I grew up in the 60s and understood what you are trying to do here, but most of the younger members of the staff simply didn't get it. Thanks again for sending it. Now, I have to add that they're in San Francisco, so they didn't have the experience of the Southern California tiki scene.
Mm-hmm.
The general reaction, at that time, all the other major publishers were on the East Coast in New York. And they had this reaction that I knew very well from film projects, which was like, what else is like it is out there? So they wanted to play it safe. They wanted to something to compare it to. And I was like, no, that's what's so amazing about this. Nothing has ever been done about it. It's discovery. You know, by the late 90s, all the other retro stuff like Cadillacs and, you know, film stars and stuff had been regurgitated a dozen times already. But here was something that had not been found. And, you know, instead of being excited about that, the publisher was like, what else is out there? I don't know. So yeah, it took a cool guy like Benedict Tuschen to see the value of it in publishing.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
definitely. And so you released the book, it's on Taschen. People are all around the world are getting their hands. I'm sure a lot of people in the scene had access to it. You tell a story about how you went to the Kahiki closing, but unfortunately you only bring one copy. We'd love to hear that, but then also we're very curious about what was the general critical reception for the people who were getting this in their local bookstore who had no frame of reference to what Tiki was. Do you remember anything of what the public was saying or critics?
General amazement, because you know, here in Southern California, people still had grown up with remnants of it, or they remembered going to these places as children for special events. And then it had been totally forgotten and really dropped out of everybody's mind. It had disappeared without being noticed, you know.
Yeah.
So to see it, find it all in the book again, it brought back this flood of memories. And you know, it was all generally very, very positive and excitement driven, definitely.
When you were writing the Book of Tiki, did you know that you were going to do multiple books, or did you think this was going to be the book and you were going to be done?
Yeah, absolutely. But you know, like we were saying earlier, what then happened at the same time, Tiki Central started happening, and then you started connecting with all these other people, and then all these other. I had used all my best material for the Book of Tiki, but by the time 2006 came around, I had so many other collectors. eBay started happening too, you know, and so there people had my Book of Tiki as a guide, what to look for, and then they started collecting it. But I was the big kahuna, so I had all these other collectors to draw from, and get material for the next book and the next. It just kept on, you know, going and self-perpetuating the whole, you know, discovery of Tiki culture.
Yeah.
Do you feel like there are still mysteries out there from the first week of Tiki, like things that are still maybe we'll never know?
Yeah, you know, hopefully, because you don't want to get this feeling that you know it all. And I still, to this day, you know, I get excited that things are being discovered. You know, like that photo with the Tiki Girls truck, you know, I had no idea back then. Or, you know, I can't recall a specific instance, but every other week or so, somebody posts something and like, I have never seen this before. This is really cool. I doubt that, I mean, that there are any Tiki apartments buildings left here in LA that I haven't photographed and that I know about. But there was one not too many months ago that had a double A-frame that I had never. There I go. I'm you know, proving that I'm actually wrong. There was one just a couple of months ago that I had never known. I try to preserve the sense of mystery. Like with some places, you know, there is this postcard of the interior of Tiki Bob's, and it was actually the inside of it was really kind of a modest place, and I purposely have not used it in any of my books because I want to keep up the myth of Tiki Bob's, and the same with my recent book I did this whole chapter about Aloha Joes,
Hmm.
and Pete, my co-author Pete and I were so excited when we finally got to this one person that runs the Palm Springs, what is it called? A history archive. She had some photos of the interiors, and nobody has ever seen any photos of the interiors.
Yeah.
And again, it was kind of modernist sparse with cool masks on the walls, but it wasn't one of those fully decked out places. So yeah, I try to maintain the mystery about people and places, and I still, like I said before, I still am surprised sometimes about the stuff that comes up and the things that are still being discovered.
I think that's part of the reason why that draws me back always to the mid-century. I mean, that's I know some maybe semi-pessimistically would view it as I'm nostalgic for an era that I never experienced, but rather it's just that when you have a almost 20 years of American popular psyche devoted to one specific style, there's so much that permeates throughout culture. I mean, you have Richard Nixon going to the Trader Vic's DC in the 70s, but then you also
Right.
have every single home tiki bar that maybe, somebody like me whose grandfather had two pictures of, things like that, that
Right,
keeps it going. That kind of keeps that almost magic alive of like that period that there's still always more to discover.
right. Or the restaurant folder photos, the souvenir folders that you would get from restaurants. It
Yeah.
always kills me because it's just the people are in the way of the tikis. But
Yeah.
sometimes you get to see a glimpse, and you get to see, something that you haven't seen before in a restaurant. Um, but yeah, it's hard to convey that sensation of walking into an authentic vintage tiki bar like the Kahiki,
Yeah.
um, because there's so few of them left, you know. And the ones that are left at this point, they had to renovate. I mean, even the Tiki T got a little bit spruced up recently, but the Tiki T is maybe one of the best kept original tiki bars still around. Or you happen to be in Japan, like in Tokyo, where I just
Mhm.
went to the Trader Vic's anniversary, and the Japanese take such good care of whatever they have. It looked like it completely like a time warp, really. Everything from the decor to they still had the tiki stem glasses there that they were serving their drinks in,
Yeah.
the cocktails, the service. It was like a perfect tiki bar like it was in 1974 when it opened. And in 74, the Trader Vic's that opened in the early 70s were very much still like the 1960s bars. The other good example is the Trader Vic's in Munich, which is also all original, and I highly recommend that for an experience of an authentic tiki bar.
Yeah. I think a lot of people would be probably in if they're able to make it to these classic bars. I mean, they can never be overstated by any means because they are what inspired the modern era. But they're also like a living testament to what it was really like. Because now we go to certain bars and they are by all textbook definitions, they're perfect. The cocktails are perfect, the decor is perfect, and everything else. But I mean, like you're saying, is that we would love to think that Tiki Bob's was as decorated as it was or as perfect as it was. It really wasn't, and it's funny because you had Don the Beachcombers, but then across the street you had Monty Prusser's, and Monty Prusser's was not a tiki bar.
Right.
Um, so I think yeah, again with the almost 100 years of the well, I'll say 70, and then if you add on the pre-Tiki period, then almost 100 now.
Yeah.
Um, and that's what your books do such a good job of providing that historical context while still giving you enough, in your terms, eye candy to look at over the generations.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad. There are. I'm talking like there's none left, but yes, there are. Let's not forget the Tonga Room in San Francisco. That's still there and still original. The Halakahiki in River Grove in Chicago, an amazing time warp of Whitco, of a Whitco tiki bar. There are still some left, but the Kahiki was really a tragedy because, you know, it was right at the cusp of the style coming back when it, you know, when it closed down and got destroyed. So I was really glad to. I went there before the party, the farewell party happened, because I wanted to photograph it for the Book of Tiki. And I went with Jeff Berry, was my lighting assistant, and I rented some lights because back then, you know, another thing that you have to realize, you didn't have cell phones that can take these amazing photos in dark bars, almost more than the human eye does. Back then, you know, you had to photograph on film, and like either I, as a cinematographer, I refused to use a flashlight because it would make it destroyed the whole atmosphere, you know, it was flat, bright lighting. And so unless I would rent some lights and set them up, which I luckily, as with my cinematography experience, I knew how to do, you know, I went to in the 90s, I went to the Chicago Trader Vic's and down in the basement of the Benson Hotel. It was an amazingly intact one too, but it was, you know, completely dark. So I ended up not taking any pictures. I got the royal treatment, which was great because Hans Richter, the CEO of Trader Vic's at the time, who was German, by the way, too, ironically. He started out at the Munich Trader Vic's, but he was in the San Francisco office, and I had met him the year before and gotten, you know, a tour of the closed down San Francisco Trader Vic's, and I got, you know, some photos from him. But also the frustrating thing that he did tell me is that Trader Vic's used to keep folders for every new location that they opened up with photos and all the stuff that went, you know, they printed for that were in these folders. And when the offices moved, they got rid of them all. You know, that's the same with like when I discovered the menus at Oceanic Arts. There was a menu company here in LA, the Lord Menu Company. So they were still there. So I called them up and like, wow, do you have any, you know, do you have an archive of your old photos and your old designs, cover designs? Like, no, you got rid of all that stuff.
Like the Library of Alexandria almost. All the stuff that went to the, I really wonder, I mean, how many things that there was a, you know, a 1 of 5 or some weird one-off type of thing, whether that's pictures, files, mugs, whatever, and they just went to the dump. One day someone said, yeah, let's just get rid of this old stuff.
Yeah. It's, you know, out with the old, in with the new. And well, that's why I had to become an urban archaeologist to dig that stuff up. And like I said, I was then, you know, after the Book of Tiki, I was aided by all these other collectors that had started getting into it, and it was great. It was really good.
Yeah. Well, jumping back a little bit prior to the Book of Tiki, when you were on your urban archaeology expeditions, I mean, there's a photo of yours that I love. I think I mean, you're in it. I think Martin and Rebecca Kate are in it, and a couple others. It's at Trader Mort's in San Diego, right on the street from Holly High.
Right.
How did you get tipped off for places that were not in Hollywood or places that were a little bit further out? How did?
Well, that was Bosco, for example, because he was living down in Escondido, and he had a grasp of the San Diego tiki scene, and it, you know, it became pretty clear pretty soon how amazing Shelter Island, not only the Bali High, but all of Shelter Island was with its A-frame architecture. And then, you know, the Hanalei hotel was still called the Hanalei. It had this great outrigger sign. And the restaurant still, it was, other than the Konakai in Chicago that I visited, but again, had no light to photograph the interior. It was the only other restaurant that still had the feature of indoor streams going throughout the restaurants that were
Yeah.
crossed by bridges, originating from waterfalls, even sometimes from the outside, or waterfalls coming down the wall of the restaurant, and then building the stream that would form these islands where you would sit on tables and you had to cross these tiki poled bridges to get to. And Hanalei was, still intact. Part of the reason was some of these places got kind of built out late, like the Hanalei took over the decor of the luau in Beverly Hills in about 1980. And so it was it was not from the 60s. This was a full decked out tiki restaurant from the early 80s. That's why it was still around. Because what happened was a lot of these water features with the apartment buildings too, they started, developing leaks, and it got too costly, supposedly, or too labor intensive to maintain them. So they just turned off the water and filled in the moats, and that was that.
Yeah.
And the same thing happened with the Hanalei restaurant. These hotels, they always get sold off to other hotel chains. And then the new owners had the standard catalog, what you need to do to update to be considered a conference hotel. So, of course, that is all, make the space as generic as possible, basically.
Yeah.
Right.
Pay paradise, put up a parking lot, as they say, basically. They quote the song.
Yeah. I know, speaking of Shelter Island, we stayed at the Humphreys Half Moon Inn there with the big A-frame out front. And as you walk through the back kind of garden area, they have the water features, they have the Bumate carved tikis back there and everything. And it was really pretty to see.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's great when you can still find it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, now that we're branching out a little bit, I mean, you go from Hollywood to Ventura to be Auto, and now you're all the way down in San Diego. Because you went to Oceanic Arts and you saw the menus, you saw the different locations across the country that they were doing.
Right.
When did you realize that there was small pockets of tiki folk? You might have already mentioned it, but so when you realized that, and then when did you go start venturing out to see if these locations were still there?
Like the Kahiki was clearly one of the biggest places out there. So I needed to go there. Was one of my first, to document it too for the Book of Tiki. But then when I got into Whitco, wanted to do Tiki Modern, I went on a trip along the Florida coast, 2006, and I, photographed the Aku Tiki Inn. Julian's was still around, although too dark to photograph inside. But yeah, no, I did, for my specific book projects, I did specific expeditions. And at that point, I was lucky to be, met by other tiki enthusiasts as that functioned as my guides and stuff, and that was really great. What other places did I go to? We went to Detroit to the Chin Tiki.
Well, yeah.
After that had already closed, and I had contacted the son of Marvin Chin, and he let us in, and so I got to bring some lights and photograph that.
Wow.
That was really cool before it got torn down. Although it already had been messed with, because They had shot the Eminem movie 8 Mile in there. So
Oh yeah.
tikis had been moved around and stuff, but they were still there. Supposedly a lot of stuff got snagged, but it was still amazing. It was an amazing tiki temple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're walking through all of the mid 90s all the way up and now I think we're probably in the mid to late 2000s at this point. So, jumping ahead almost a full decade. I know this may be a dreaded word to some that I'm bringing it up, but um it seemed in the late 2010s, like 2018, 2019, places were opening up. Really, the speed started picking up. And then, of course, COVID hit and things shut down. I think you were once quoted to say that you believe that at this point, Tiki would likely return back to the home bars and specifically to um,
Just
more.
become more of
Well,
an underground movement again.
Yeah, and so I'm curious to see, like, was that hope I don't know if maybe that's a misattributed quote or not, but
well,
how have you seen like Tiki kind of like walked off COVID and now where we're at now?
um, well, it's there's still new tiki bars opening, so I don't see an end to it in any way. Um, but the home bar, just like the craft cocktail revival, although I am very critical of it having taken over too much attention from tiki with a
Yeah,
new generation of young bartenders that in there, there's these books out like Easy Tiki or Minimalist Tiki, although I'm friends with Matt Piatek, but
yeah,
they call tiki what is just tiki cocktails. It should have been called Easy Tiki Cocktails or Minimalist Tiki Cocktails. But
yeah,
people see this and they buy these books and they get the impression, oh, that's all that is,
Mm.
cocktails and mixology. And that was a dangerous part in the revival in the starting in the late 2000s to the mid 2010s, when all these new tiki bars started opening with just palm leaf wallpaper, a
yep,
couple of cost plus basket lamps hanging, and yeah, a full tiki cocktail menu. But they were not tiki bars, but they called themselves that. And that's when I would get criticized as a purist or gatekeeper. But my interest is always to keep people uh, informed about the amazing spectrum of tiki culture. And to me that was like misinformation, to make people believe it's just about the cocktails.
yeah,
The same thing then happened with the tiki mug craze. A lot of new people came into collecting tiki mugs just because there were these quirky, odd, the cool looking objects, but they didn't know why I was saying no, the creature of the Black Lagoon is not a tiki mug, and it's
yeah,
on and on. um, and back to the 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 cocktail mixology revival. It was an important fact to keep tiki going, because by the time the book Tiki Modern came out 2007, it was sort of slowing down, and people also felt like everything had been already published in the Book of Tiki. So the first printing sold so slowly that it never got reprinted by fashion. That's why it's so
mhm,
hard to find now. And then the craft cocktail revival came along, and make no mistake, it wasn't a tiki cocktail revival. Um, Among the craft cocktail aficionados initially, tiki was kind of poo-pooed as still as like
yeah,
umbrella. And it's thanks to Jeff Barry's staying power that slowly started to dawn on people that what an amazing art form just the cocktails were. But just like in the heyday of tiki, you know, cocktails were the lifeblood of these tiki bars because of the high profit margin.
Yeah.
And I'm totally happy to admit that they had this importance. But again, they were just one facet of it all. And the same goes with tiki mugs. And then the home bar revival also throughout COVID, I'm sure it helped because you know, that people had places to go to among friends where just a smaller group could congregate and feel safe and get plastered on great cocktails. And you know,
Yeah.
home bar thing includes home mixology, and that is a great way for tiki fans to get to involve themselves in the culture and to become, you know, self-taught mixologists and you know, try out all these recipes and stuff. Not everybody is a carver or a tiki mug maker, and that way, you know, a lot more people felt involved in the culture and being able to participate and show it and share it with their friends. So, you know, yay for cocktails and tiki home bars.
Yeah, you hit on a point that I believe very passionately about. That I do agree that it seems that cocktails have maybe overshadowed a little bit of certain elements of the whole tiki subculture and what the Polynesian pop movement was back in the 1950s. And I do absolutely agree. Again, on the other half of the coin is that it has gotten people more into it, and that is actually, you know, that's how I got into it. I remember coming home and say, you know, I want to try tiki cocktails. And I don't remember what possessed me to do it, but I just wanted to do it.
Yeah.
But I do see that, especially in a lot of certain social media and things like that, that tiki is cocktails to people,
Right.
but not necessarily anything else.
Right. But that, you know, COVID, unfortunately or fortunately, put a stop to that because, you know, a lot of that, the business slowed down so extremely that a lot of those young tiki punks said, you know, I went to this event on the East Coast that was just mostly young tiki bartenders. And, you know, they had this um, slogan, tiki as fuck. And I'm like, oh my God. You know, it's just not, tiki is not a bro thing. It's
Yeah.
not, you know, but to the young people, you have to allow that. Had to make it their own culture. And it was, I saw it almost like a post DJ culture back from after the generation when DJing was like the hip thing. For a while, tiki mixology and working in tiki bars became a hip thing for these young men and women that formed their own scene in that.
Yeah.
And they were having a great time and inspiring each other and stuff. They just didn't care about the history of it anymore.
Yeah, which I mean, again, it's unfortunate we're seeing some of the vintage mugs start declining in value and things like that. And I mean, for me personally, I will always love mid-century. I will always love the Polynesian pop of the 1950s and 60s. There's a lot of stuff I love in it. So, I mean, maybe we'll all shake our fists at the sky and say this is how I want it to be. But in your opinion, in over 30 years of expertise, where do you view the scene going from here? Do you have any opinions, or where?
Yeah,
Yeah,
you know, I've always been of the opinion there will always be people like us who come in from different you know, aspects of it and then discover the value and the amazingness of true vintage, you know, patina and history. And then there will be those that are just into mixology or those that are into monster tiki. You know, there's a
yeah,
events coming up here somewhere called the dark side of tiki. And I'm like, there is no dark side of tiki. It's you know, it's a different thing. And I grew up in Germany being a fan of Universal monster movies.
yeah,
I built the Aurora models of the mummy and you know, and I loved the original creature from the Black Lagoon movies, I just don't connect it with Tiki.
Yeah.
To me, it's sort of a lazy way to reference something that, oh yeah, I know that, that's cool. So let's, and Tiki is cool, and let's throw it together. And to me, it's just not, they're not doing the research into real vintage Tiki and into what inspired mid-century Tiki, oceanic art. There is
Yeah.
still such an incredible horn of plenty of unique designs and concepts in original oceanic art. And that's where the original artists like Leroy, they got their stuff from art books,
Yeah.
and you can still do that. But people use, they go the easy way. They just go a couple of mouse clicks and, you know, throw in what they like. And to me, it kind of waters down what made Tiki unique in the first place. If you bring in all these other aspects of American pop cultures that should stay in their own, genre. But yeah, so I see one of the greatest, unfortunately, threats to me is probably AI,
Yeah.
because now articles about Tiki are written by AI. They're, luckily AI has not figured out how to design the images of Tikis. You can always tell that they're, off and plastic
Yeah.
looking. But eventually, while that will, get better from the AI point of view, the younger generations will lose their ability to differentiate too.
Yeah.
And or I get the sense in a lot of cases the younger generation just don't care about 20th century pop culture as much as I do, or my friends do. They're just, it's like something, that the the patina of something vintage isn't something that fascinates them as it fascinates me, just by I don't know, by a generational change of attitudes or sensibilities. It's a different sensibility. So I think there will always be people like us, and there will always, the other genres. They will just continue to coexist parallel.
Yeah.
And
The AI is like really interesting because it sometimes is really hard to differentiate, especially not necessarily in the imagery, but even AI is writing and publishing books on Amazon. So people going and what they think is doing their due diligence and trying to research or learn from these more physical mediums is even sometimes
oh yeah,
just foolishness.
Yeah.
there's already an AI Tiki book out there, and there's an AI, mostly AI written Tiki magazine.
Yep.
And
I mean, there's podcasts, there's YouTube videos, there's all AI, all related to our subculture. And if it gets down
really,
to this level, who knows? Yeah.
oh man. But ironically, I just posted about that yesterday on my Facebook page,
Hmm.
because I was trying to limit what Facebook can put into it. They want to put all of Facebook into AI, and I wanted to limit my, what can happen with my page. But it had this requirement: you have to apply for it. First of all, you can't just turn it off, which is
Yeah.
already sucks,
Yeah.
but then you have to apply, and then you have to write into a box an example of where your work was used by AI and as reasoning why you don't want that to happen. So I put in, what can you tell me about Sven Kirsten into Microsoft Copilot, and it was amazing. The write-up was some of the best stuff that I had ever written about me. I was like, man, Is the eye trying to butter me up or something? But
All flattery.
totally, but no, but really, considering my experience in cinematography and how I'm with my book, I'm creating an immersive experience, like, whoa.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure our write-up for this episode of the show is going to be very glowing. It's going to be very positive, and I swear, not a word of it's going to be AI.
No.
We've made that a big point. We will not use AI in any capacity. So all the compliments are coming directly from us.
Right.
Well, I mean, speaking of compliments, there's no amount of compliments or praise or anything that we could give you that really shows the appreciation for what you've done for the Tiki community. And but we can thank you definitely for your time and sitting down with us. And we really hope that a lot of our listeners will hopefully
Appreciate the stories that you shared today. Yeah.
absolutely. So
Yeah. Keep me posted, and when you post anything about it, I'll repeat it on my Facebook page. That's the only.
thank you.
I don't have a blog. I don't go. I stopped going on Instagram after my like 5,000 images and followers were compromised by a breach, and nobody cares. I'm put all this work into it, and some asshole fucks with it. And first of all, you have to jump through hoops to prove that it was not you and that you're you, and it's just gone. And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Okay, I'm not doing that again." So I'm really like the old guy, on my Facebook page, doing my stuff, and I'm fine with it. That takes enough of my time already. So
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Kirsten, and we hope you
Happy
Yeah.
Christmas.
okay, keep me posted, guys.
Yes, we will. Thank
Absolutely.
you.
Ciao.
Thank you to Mr. Kirsten for joining us on this week's episode. We had so much fun sitting down with you and talking Tiki. I feel like we could have gone on for hours.
Like Ellie said, we definitely appreciate you sitting down, but we also appreciate all the things you've done for the Tiki community. I've read all of your books a number of times, and we definitely appreciate you being that guiding compass in the Tiki scene for what isn't Tiki, and those opinions on where we're going from here, not only of the historical perspective of where we have been, but also still guiding a lot of the younger artists of what we should be doing.
So we hope you all enjoyed this conversation. We're really digging back there, trying to talk to these people who have been there since the beginning. And this was a really big interview. Just for us personally, it was something we were really looking forward to, and we're really happy to share with all of you. Now, a few announcements. We had some amazing artwork done for the show by Sue at the 50s Vintage Dame. If you haven't had a chance to see it yet, head on over to Instagram and see the amazing logo and artwork she's done for the show. We really appreciate it. And with that said, we're going to be having some new merch opportunities coming here soon. We're really looking into a few things, and we're really excited about it.
Yeah, and we're going to be sitting in on some events coming up here in the next couple of months. So more often than not, you're probably going to find us and we offer you a sticker or something. Don't be surprised because we have a lot planned.
Yeah, we're just so happy that you all are listening and that we can share this podcast and this whole historical journey with all of you.
And we know that there's a million different outlets for Tiki out there. For those of you who've joined the Facebook group, thank you so much. We hope to connect with you more in the future. If you haven't checked that out, or the Instagram or anything else, please do that. It definitely means a lot just so we can hear your feedback, your opinions on who you want to hear next on the show, but also how we're doing, or just to say hi. We are great proponents of the Tiki Ohana mindset, is that we want to reach out to you, talk, maybe not even about the show, maybe not even about Tiki. Some of the most interesting conversations I've had at Tiki bars had nothing to do with the hobby, but we still want to hear from you nonetheless, and keeping that Ohana alive.
Thank you again to Mr. Kirsten for joining us. He said the best way to contact him, to find him, is on Facebook. It's just under Sven Kirsten. And make sure you check out his books, starting with the Book of Tiki. You can find us on Instagram at the Tiki Talk Show and Kona Cove _Home Tiki Bar.
You can also find us at YouTube at the Tiki Talk Show and on all major streaming services. So please continue checking us out. leaving a thumbs up, likes, all that other good stuff that people say. We appreciate your time, and we hope to talk to you again soon.
Bye.